Hey friend, I'm so glad you're here. Today I want to share with you some really fun and bright, bold cards that anyone can create using a fun technique that requires no skill whatsoever. I also have some fun things that my little crafting helper has shared. She's inspired part of today's project, and I think you'll love to see it. Let's get started. So all the techniques I'm sharing today have to do with using spritzers. These are fun. They're so easy to use that you can create some really unique looks with them. And my the last tip I'm going to share, you are going to love. We all love a little shimmer and shine, right? We love a way to add some shimmer and shine to every project, so I'll share that with you last. So what we're going to do first, my first way to use a spritzer that I want to share with you is just to spritz some color onto your background. Super fun and easy way to add some color to a background, especially if you're making a lot of cards and you need some kind of background quickly. That's not a lot of work. This is great. So you put either some water or some rubbing alcohol in your spritzer with a few drops of ink. Add as much ink as you like, depending on how dark you want your color. Rubbing alcohol will dry a little quicker than water, just so you know. So I prefer to use rubbing alcohol just because it dries quickly. So there we have a bit of color on our background. Now we are going to do one more thing to this piece of paper. We're going to make 3 cards as we go through here, but we are going to do one more thing before we are done with this. I want to do a bit of stamping. I have this really fun abstract stamp set that I'm using today called Swirl Designs. It has these adorable dies that go with it. You'll be seeing these in a moment as well. What I'm going to do with this is just spritz it with a bit of water. And this is a technique that I've just gotten some really neat results with when I've tried this different times. So we're going to do this several times. I'll ink it up again. We'll spritz. I'll do this a couple of times, and we'll do this with a couple of stamps. But I did this, the first time I ever did this was with flower stamps, and I did a cluster of flowers this way, and it just turned out stunning. The water gives just a bit of, just a tiny bit of bleeding. It makes it look like watercolor, really, and it's just a fun thing to play around with different stamps. So let's try this. We'll do a few of these. My first color that I used was Highland Heather. Now we're doing a bit of Coastal Cabana. We'll do one more of these. Then we're going to add a couple of splatters. I think this is such a fun set, especially for young people, like teenagers, kids. Really fun look on these cards. Okay, let's do one more with the splatters, maybe 2. I love splatters. Do you love splatters on cards? I like to make them the old-fashioned way with a water painter. I like to make them the new-fashioned way with the stamps. Doesn't matter. I love splatters on my cards. Okay, we're going to set this aside, and we are going to work on another one. So here are those dies that I just mentioned. I cut these out of regular cardstock, and I turned them into masks. So how did I turn them into masks, and what do you mean, Anna? So I put them upside down. I put a bit of my multi-purpose glue, my favorite glue ever, onto my silicone craft mat here. I laid the dies upside down on here, got a bit of that glue just real thin onto my sponge, and then spread a little bit onto the back. I let them dry, and what happens with this glue when you let it dry, they become removable. So I can pull these off, I can move them, I can stick them down where I want them. This is where we are going to leave them for now, and I am going to spritz over them with the same spritzer you saw just a minute ago. We'll spritz a few times. I do want to leave some of the white showing. I could spritz enough times that it makes it a solid color, but I like the white showing. I like that effect. So we are going to leave that. Now, one more spritzing technique before we take a little break for me to finish these cards. I'm going to use my Stampin' Pierce mat underneath here, underneath this paper. I'm going to put my cardstock on here that I want to use, and we're going to ink up a block. I am going to use 3 colors. I have Timid Tiger, Crushed Curry, and Real Red. And this is a watercolor technique. You can do this with watercolor paper if you want to, but it's one that I just love. I just love this technique. So what I want to do is I'm taking this block right here. This is an eye block, and I want to ink up 3 different colors. So there's several ways to do this, but you want to ink up typically your lighter color first. You can do your light color in the middle if you want, or you can do your light color on the edge. We'll do Crushed Curry over here. We are going to do the rest of this, or at least most of the rest, with Timid Tiger. And then this is why it's important to go from light to dark. Now I'm going to put this on my Real Red, and a bit of it's going to overlap. So a bit of that orange ink is ending up in my red ink pad, but I'm not concerned because it's a darker color. So now we're going to do what we did a moment ago. We are going to spritz this with some water. You can play around with how much. The more you spritz, the lighter your colors will get, and the more this is all going to move around on the paper. And that's pretty fun, right? Okay, so I'm going to clean off my block real quick. We are going to do that one more time to cover up the rest of that paper. So I'm using regular paper here, so you'll see the effect if you use regular cardstock instead of watercolor paper. Watercolor paper does allow the color to move and blend a bit more. So we'll do Crushed Curry here again, the Timid Tiger, and some red on the end. Let's spritz this. Just think of the fun color combinations you can do this with. So I did not choose any of my color combinations here. My little helper that I told you about, you're going to see some fun things here in a few moments that she created, that I actually designed these cards to be able to use the things that she made up on them so that they would coordinate. So, okay, we are going to let these things dry. Going to make some finished cards and come back and show you my absolute favorite spritzer technique that's going to allow you to add some shimmer and shine to all of your projects. So let's take a look at these cards. They're almost done, but not quite. And I'll share how I finished them. So I have to explain. So my little helper, she just loves to create, and she just makes all of these really interesting things. And the other day she starts, I mean, they're always super messy, always. We don't craft if it's not messy. She started making all of these. So our glass mat comes with this little palette. It's made of silicone, I believe. You can mix colors, do all kinds of things. You can see it's got a bit of stain here, but she's over there creating with this, mixing colors and doing all the things. And then she takes this pattern on the back of here and she's printing these with the different colors. And she's watercoloring with a water painter different colors on this lovely white satin ribbon. So then she begs me to use them on some cards, and I had to come up with a vision. An artist needs a vision, right? I'm like, okay, how am I going to use these? So here they are. So this one, we got the ribbon here with that fun print down here. I used these big, really like these big greeting stamps, thanking you and simple birthday. A big greeting does a lot of work on a card, and you don't have to do a lot of work on the background when you use it. This one I stamped and cut out by hand. These two you can see I stamped directly on the card, but use that ribbon at an angle here with the decorative strip over top. And this one, she was so kind to give me a big long piece of ribbon. Thought it was perfect to put behind the happy birthday. So we must finish these. We must finish them. I'll bring my scrap paper back in because we need a bit of protection on our work surface. And here I have another spritzer. So this has rubbing alcohol in it with some shimmer paint. So these little bottles of acrylic paint, you can find shimmer ones, get some white shimmer, you could try some gold shimmer, you could try some different colors. Put a few drops in here. You can try it. If you want more, you can always add more. I like to back up a bit so that I don't spray off of my work surface. But let's look at these up close. And I am hoping, I am not sure you're going to be, let's look at one of these other ones. So this one, I have more faith. So this one, we got lots of splatters there that are shimmery. They're still drying. But this one, oh, this is just lovely. Purple's my favorite color, so I have to love this one. But can you see the shimmer on top of that? These just turned out really fun. Lots of fun, lots of bright colors, the technique, the spritzing. I hope you can use some of these ideas in your crafting. So we always chat at the end of my videos. And I feel like today's chat isn't very fun, but I feel like it's important. And that's why I'm going to bring it up. So you can turn it off if you don't want to listen. You can always turn it off. That's totally fine. But my question is, where do you get your news from? We don't need to be absorbed in current events all the time. We do not need to worship the news. There's a lot of that going on. We live and breathe and die by what's going on in the world. I don't think we were created to know all the things. We don't. Plus, it is totally unfair that what is reported is heavily bad when there is a lot of good in this world. This is where I want to know where the miracle news is. Where do they report the good? I know there's certain news out there that like just reports good stuff. I should find some of those and share them with you at some point. But anyway, my question is, where do you get the news? Here's why I ask. And I am when I speak about things going on in the world and issues, and we live in this culture of like people get real snippy and say that everything's political, and I've gotten kind of grumpy about that myself because it's not political. Like if it has to do with my family, if it has to do with my marriage, if it has to do with my church, if it has to do with what my kids are learning in school and what they're exposed to, like that's not political, that's personal. And a lot of this is personal that it's been forced down our throats. It's political, so don't touch it. Nobody's allowed to talk about all the things. Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, um, are you aware that the vast majority, I know I hear a lot of people say like, oh, well, I listen to this news and this news and that news, and I read this newspaper. So I feel that what I'm hearing is very well rounded. Are you aware that like the hundreds of biggest newspapers and news stations and radio stations that like all of the most of the biggest news places that report the news, they're all owned by, I believe it is 7 corporations. 7. So when we think we're getting news from like a lot of different places, it turns out, in fact, we're kind of only really getting it from like 7 places in a lot of cases. So a few years ago, I did a lot of research and I like figured out what was going on in the world. And I'm like, why is the entire world preaching the same story when there's a really big other side of the story that I can't even find when I'm searching for it? Okay. So what I learned, what I figured out since then is there are tons and tons and tons of people over here shouting at the tops of their lungs trying to get the truth out about what's going on. What over here is one big collective story of kind of what's going on, but kind of a lot of I'm not sure about the truth, and there's like a lot of other truth that we're just not going to talk about over here. Like we might kind of talk about the truth, but we're going to leave out a lot of truth that's really important. And I guess where I got so fed up was like, I just want to know both sides of the story. I just want to know both sides so that I can make my own decision. And figured out that they're not letting us know both sides. Social media, search engines, video hosting sites, news, newspapers, like all the things were all telling one story. So here's my question for you. I don't need to convince anybody of any certain views or anything. I would just encourage you that if you only listen to like big news outlets, I would encourage you to find some smaller ones. And where a lot of them are living these days are in podcasts. So, whatever your political views are, I would encourage you to search for the opposite news. Like, if you're conservative, if you consider yourself conservative, I would encourage you to really search for what's the opposite? My brain went like more liberal news. So if you consider yourself more liberal or progressive, that you search for conservative news and start listening to it. Just to listen, like we were given brains for a reason. I don't need anybody else to tell me what to believe. I want you to tell me what's going on and allow me to make my own decision about what's going on. I feel like a lot of you would probably agree with that. So anyway, wherever you get your news, I would encourage you, if they are all from like really big places, I would encourage you to find some smaller ones. And here's a big thing that I've become, I feel is important these days. Can you tell me, does the person or people who report your news, do they have similar values as you do? Do you know? Do you not know? What I've found is there are lots of podcasts, especially, and you can find these things on YouTube as well. Most of them have videos if you prefer that. I usually prefer to listen, but uh, there are loads of people out there with the same values as me, similar values to me, that are talking about what's going on, sharing important things that are never going to make the big news. And they're really important. There's really important stuff going on. We don't need to live by the news. We don't need to. I know people struggle with anxiety and whatever, and we have to turn it off. And I've had my periods of that myself. I get it. In a country where we get to vote and we get to have a say in what's going on, I do feel it is important enough to know and important to know enough to be able to participate appropriately. That's what I got for today. I appreciate you, friends. I know you're not all into all this stuff, but those of you who encourage me and don't get angry and yell at me, I appreciate it. I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll have something fun and crafty to share, and I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.